We are officially live. I'm so excited to dive into our first pre-symposium panel of the year as we lead up to our first executive symposium of the year in Austin, Texas, actually technically in Round Rock, on February 12th, as we lead up to our executive symposium on the topic Change Without Burnout, Balancing Innovation, Stability, and Team Capacity. What a pre-symposium panel does is it brings leaders who are going to be at the executive symposium together in a virtual format like this to discuss their thoughts, their topics, their insights on what they found to be effective to achieve change, drive change, but not fully burn the team out because that is a special and hard balance to strike. We've got Allyson, we've got Torey, and we've got Tom here today to share their insights. Allyson, do you mind introducing yourself?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Allyson Cline. I am the SVP of Administration and HR at Wind Energy Transmission, Texas. Thank you, Garrett, for having me on the panel today.
Of course. Torey, how about you?
I'm also in Austin, Texas. I'm Torey Palmer. I'm the Chief Growth Officer for GBS Worldwide, an employer brand recruit marketing agency.
Very cool. And then Tom, how about you?
I'm the director of solution consulting at Braze.
Nice. And I'm Garrett Mintz. I'm the founder of Ambition in Motion. Our vision's a world where the vast majority of people are excited to go to work. When they're there, their expectations meet reality, and when they come home, they feel fulfilled. And we believe that starts with leaders because leaders create the experiences employees have while at work. And so we create technologies and communities to empower leaders to be their best selves. And one of the ways we build communities by putting on these executive symposiums. So let's dive into the topic. Change without burnout, balancing innovation, stability, and team capacity. So one of the things that I'm seeing a lot going on right now in the workplace, a lot of organizations are driving change initiatives, but it's this really interesting dynamic going on. So sometimes you might see a scenario where an organization does a reorg or a reduction in force, and then they turn around and they're like, "Hey, y'all, like I know we just lost some team members, but let's try to drive some innovation with AI and see if we can drive some efficiencies here." And I just feel like those are kind of like at odds kind of things going on because for innovation to occur, one would assume that psychological safety needs to be in place within an organization for them to feel comfortable enough to innovate. But if we're thinking to ourselves, oh my gosh, I am now having to do double work because half my team was slashed and we're still expected to get the same amount of work done. And on top of that, those people were my friends and now they don't know where their next job's going to be. Like, how safe can I feel in my role? Like, when will I have time to innovate? So I guess I'd like to kick off with an initial question is when you've observed, whether it be at your own company or in other organizations, organizations going through a change initiative, especially one that might negatively impact psychological safety within the organization, what have you found as a really great way to kind of build back that psychological safety and reinforce people's roles within their organization?
If you want, I can start with that. I can speak to something that actually happened at an agency I was just at where we got acquired, came over, a lot of change management, just kept changing the structure. I think they went through three different reorgs. But when you talk about psychological safety, I always harken back to this aspect that employees of the month and employees of the year ended up being part of the layoff. And so when you talk, Garrett, where you're talking about like how you might lose friends and then kind of figure out things, imagine the idea that you could be the employee of the year and still be part of a round of riffs. It can be really, really difficult. So to that point, there is an aspect around transparency that I think can sometimes be a big driver in maybe acceptance that change is coming. But then, of course, that also has to be structured in a way that the company cares about themselves in that moment. So their transparency is what they're willing to say, not necessarily all the things that they should say for the psychological safety side of things.
Yeah, there's a joke I have with, and it goes right to that psychological safety. When there's a riff or someone's let go or whatever, or late, like even if it's a broader or narrower riff, the joke I have is if people don't know what's happening and there's no communication and people have like the other employees who are still there have no idea why all of a sudden there are three people missing, you're in a horror movie. If you explain it to people and you walk through and you're as candid and as open about it as you possibly can be, you're in a drama. We'd all much rather be in the latter.
Totally agree. Love that. And I love horror movies. but not in the workplace.
Yeah, exactly.
And sometimes I think you both have hit on it, but giving people what the definition of change is.
Mm,
Because sometimes in everyone's mind, change means something different to them. So if you talk about what the change is that you're implementing or going through, it's helpful for them to kind of digest and ask the right questions for their understanding.
yeah.
Yeah. And to that point, like sometimes with change, it can be kind of unrelenting change. We've all kind of seen that where the company's like, oh, we're shifting here. And then we kind of navigate and we're going to go over here now.
Yeah.
And I think the only way that that change can be kind of accepted in a way that you can move forward is if that change is also allowed to give people some recovery time and some grace. And most companies, to Garrett's point, is like, oh, no, nope, those 3 people are gone. We got to take care of this. Now it's all on us. Let's do it. And not recognizing that complete slash and what people are going through, not only psychologically for themselves, but also now what the daily work looks like, the responsibility side of things, and maybe absorbing some stuff that they just don't want to absorb. And now all of a sudden it's a more frustrating state for them on a daily basis. Yes, they have the job and they're happy about it, but they might not be happy with the situation that has come with why they're currently still in it.
That's
Yeah.
interesting. Oh yeah, go ahead, Tom.
I was just saying one thing that's also served me well, and I come from this from not be more of a middle management position, and I my last organization there was always a lot of change and always a lot of like there's so much upheaval, and what I ended up doing is like all right in this group that we have like my team let me do what I can to uh, protect you from the chaos. And what we're going to do is we're going to be heads down. And well, not really heads down. It's not fair. It's just like it's being open and honest about it, doing what we can to have as much stability as we could in our individual organization and getting you just keeping our ducks in a row. And what ended up happening is we became almost this pillar of stability and it became a team that people wanted to come work for and we just and then as the change never stopped. It just what happened was we just became used to it and we found ways to thrive in it. And and that's easier to do when you have smaller teams. I think if you can do it when you have a smaller group, when it's higher up, when you're I think when you're in more senior leadership, that becomes a little bit more difficult. But I think for like middle managers, that can be something you can actually use to your advantage. It's a great recruitment tool internally. It's a great tool for I mean, it also makes you look good that you have turnover in other parts of the organization, yet your team seems to still succeed.
So I hear that point. I want to play a little devil's advocate here because there is a striking a fine balance in all that. When there's all this change going around in the organization, you're like, oh, we're gonna lock in, or we're gonna hunker down, or we're gonna weather the storm, or whatever it is. That is cool, I think, to like an extent, but sometimes it can create an A team, B team sort of mentality where, and this is something we'll see often in organizations where like, you've got an executive that's like, this is the ops department, or this is the finance department, or this is the HR, or whatever department they're in. And it's like, we don't care what's going on outside with the other departments. We're hunkering down and we're gonna like stick to our guns and like do our thing or whatever. And it's great, but it's like, as an executive team, y'all are not rowing together. You're like everyone's rowing in this direction. You're like rowing sideways, and it can create a stressful dynamic. But I also hear a point of trading that internal culture within the team, and where do you find that fine balance? Does that kind of call out make sense?
It does. I mean,
It-
go ahead, go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like to Garrett's point, what I was hearing from that is like, you know, people resist change if they don't know and they don't feel like they're a part of it. And so it's, to bring it back, how do we make sure that they feel part of the change? So either whether it's, that's where I said this thing before, but if it's too much transparency, you're in the drama, not enough transparency, it's the horror, right? I'm gonna use that, Tom. I'm gonna take that and I'm gonna steal that. I'm just letting you know ahead of time. That will be referenced a lot going forward.
So, so I was just going to say also, Tom, you mentioned that you were part of middle management. I think sometimes that's the missing piece. Executives and anyone going through change, they want to identify the middle management, the middle group of the employee level as being the messenger. That's not good when you're going through change. They should be part of the change and they
Yeah.
should understand the change so they have the buy-in because they're the ones that are touching the majority of the employee base. So
Mhm.
if they feel that they're included and they're part of it, they have value in that change
Yeah.
that we're going through, that's going to make it so much easier. So I think, and you saying you're the middle side, I think you're the connector. That's the best part is connecting the organization to whatever it is that the strategy is of that moment.
Yeah.
And I think that's key. And what you're doing with your team, I think that's dynamic. And if leadership, when they're talking about change, incorporated and challenged all of their managers to think the way you're thinking, it makes it easy for people to accept
Yeah.
and to be part of the movement as the company is going forward or whatever the direction they're going.
Yeah, I like there's two things you said in there that I really, really like, where like that senior leadership is part of the messaging. Like it's one thing for me as a middle manager to say, hey, this is what's happening. But when a senior leader, and I always commend senior leaders who are willing to come in on that call, that team meeting, and say that. Not all of them have the guts to do that. Like they really don't because they're scared of what's going to happen because now you've kind of entered into a town hall where things can go sideways really quickly. I really appreciate it. And I also like, there's another thing that you said in there, and this is really important in being candid. In addition to being candid, how do, and actually something you said earlier, Garrett, psychological safety. How do these individual, because really when you come down to it, what they're worried about is how do I fit in this new vision? Do I fit? I mean, the first thing they're like, do I fit in this new vision? Is there going to be another round of cuts and I'm going to be in part of this? And coming to that psychological safety is like, okay, here's how you fit in. Here's how your skills are going to be beneficial for this. And here's why I'm confident that you being here is really, really important. And the specific skills that you have are going to drive this and make us successful. I love that.
Yeah, but there's to I'll play devil's advocate to that. There's two situations, right? There's one
Yeah.
where the riff makes sense sometimes,
Oh.
where it's like, oh, I could see why these people, like maybe it's low performers or whatever. But then there's that other time where people that are your colleagues that kind of run circles around you get let go, and you're just like, wait a second. And so, to your point, when you have those gaps, that's where the fear starts building in, and you start because you don't have that information, you don't have the insight as to whether it was, random numbers, whether it was whatever, right? Because we're talking about all these
Yeah.
different rifts that are happening all the time. It's like, oh, if it could happen to that person, it could happen to me. And so it doesn't matter in those situations what success you've had, how good you've been, or whatever. You start questioning every single aspect, and
Yeah.
then you're just stuck in a place where those gaps get filled with fear because there is nothing else going in there.
Well,
Yeah.
you bring up these points of transparency, and I really like this. I'd be curious to know from your perspective, what role does vulnerability play within that? Because I think that there's an element, like I think what we're all kind of sharing and perhaps agreeing on is that if we as executives can be transparent about why a change is happening, to Tom's point, it creates a drama versus a horror story because the horror is the unknown of what is the next move. Whereas the drama, it's like, okay, I kind of know where things are going. I know why this decision was made. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I can understand where I can fit my puzzle piece in here. And if, to Tori's point, I see a colleague of mine who was like running laps around me, or at least I thought they were, it's like
Right.
maybe they were 1.3x faster than me, but they're getting paid double my wage. Well, as an organization, they're not double you. So you are technically a more valuable employee to the organization because
And
you at running this speed at this salary base is more valuable than someone who's getting paid double you running maybe 30% faster. And so anyways, I guess where I'm going within all of this is what role does vulnerability play from an executive standpoint, kind of saying like, hey, this is an experiment we're running, or here's some of the challenges that we're observing, or here's where our profitabilities, our numbers are at, and where we may not have been hitting over the last quarter or year or whatever it may be that we're evaluating. This is what we're looking towards moving forward. And, I don't know, to flip it, can the employee position themselves into this vision versus the company having to position that person into the vision? So, anyways, that's a lot.
I
What do you
got you. So to Tom's point, um, and I even said this, like, and Gary, you know this about me, like, there's a selfish aspect where you go, well, I'm a leader at this company, whether I'm going to be a leader at this company for however the duration is, or whether I'm going to be a leader at another company, I have to look at myself in the mirror, I have to be all those things, right? And so I think it comes down to empathy and it comes down to your own character and how you decide that you want to be. There might be certain things that you're told you can't say, and you
Yeah.
can even have transparency around. I know I was part of one of these things where actually uh, was part of a riff, but also was part of previous things that weren't riffs of myself, but you had to communicate. And there's ways that you can go about saying what you can't say by also not, giving away like, oh, I'm gonna, disrespect my boss by saying something. No, it's not that. It's you can say there's certain things I can't say, but I will
Yeah.
be as transparent as I can be. And I feel like, and this is where I said the selfish part about this is like, I want to be a leader at every company I go to, and I want the people that I've worked for to A, either recommend me or B, want to follow me, which has been kind of the case. And it's because of the way in which you decide that you're going to, put on your shoes and be a leader that day. So it comes down to character and it comes down to empathy and being just like the leader that you want to be. That's how I look at it.
And I think vulnerability is huge because if you show that you're vulnerable, it allows people to, one, you let your guard down. That's the
Hmm.
way people will see it. And then they start to respect you because they're seeing how it now impacts you. And I always say, HR people, we want to tell stories, right? And if you can tell a story that's a factual story that relates to you, that you've been part of change, I would say I've used myself in many stories when I'm trying to implement change. And like one of them, I knew that we were going to close the whole company eventually. But we needed to make a lot of change along the way to make the company attractive for someone else to be interested in it. And I shared that story without sharing any information that was sensitive. But I talked about, all of us here could be in a position where, the company has to look at things in a different way because this is what we're looking to do as we leap forward, But again, it's about bringing them into you, letting them see you as a person and not as a leader that helps them now feel that they're connected to you and whatever your messaging is, they want to follow it because they have respect and they feel that you have brought them into the space that's safe. Yeah.
Okay, I
Yeah.
don't want to put you on the
Yeah.
spot. Sorry, Tom, real quick. Allison, I don't want to put you on the spot real quick, but that is such an interesting point. Can you try to reenact what that like message was? Because what you're describing is a really interesting dynamic. Knowing the cliff is coming, but you needing people to hike up the mountain to get to the end of the cliff before the cliff happens. How did you strike that balance of vulnerability and transparency? And keep, yeah, but like, how did you do it? That's like, that is, I think that's one of the hardest things to do. And I don't know how, I
Oh, it
don't
was
know.
difficult. It
Yeah.
was difficult for me to hold composure, one.
Yeah.
I think the way I was able to approach it is I knew what we had to do was necessary
Mm.
for the livelihood of a vision that I was working for an individual who had built up an agency that was large. But times changed, things changed, people changed. And that's kind of how I started. I talked about all of the highs that we had done and what we had successfully done, but then I also talked about the shift in the industry that we saw ourselves in. And with that shift, in order for things to survive, that we've put our footprint on, that we've made ours, that things had to change. And part of that change could be that I'm probably no longer your leader. And that's what I talked about. I'm probably no longer going to be here to be able to support you, but while I am, this is what we're going to do so we can leave our legacy behind. So whoever inherits what we have, they've got something beautiful and they'll know where it came from, that we were the foundation of it. And then they can build up on it. And then we can all fly off to our different places and we can continue to carry that with us. And whenever someone say, what's your greatest achievement? You've got something to talk about, you know? So you've got to talk about what's going to happen, but then you've got to build it up. But I wanted them to know that we've put something special together. And I think they like that. They saw that and they draw it into it. But then I also said, I may not be here. And I think that then got them to say, hey, but she's up here talking about it, knowing what could potentially happen. And that was the vulnerable side. And I said, and anytime everybody wants to leave a legacy, right? I want you to remember me when I'm gone. And I think that was really, really important. I think that was an important way to kind of close it out. Let's leave our state. Let's leave our mark. So then they'll understand how this company became. Yeah.
Love that. Love that.
Yeah.
That's so cool. That's like such a great, that's a good example. And the power of it was I may not be here, but then by showing that I'm going to work my butt off until whatever, D-Day is
Yeah.
for me, that is, I think it is you're just leading by example. And I think that probably is the best solution in a scenario like that.
Hmm.
Because sometimes I feel like it gets a little cagey when like an exit's about to happen and the acquiring company is going to slash everybody in the organization or at least a good chunk of everybody. They're just there for the revenue or the customer base or for whatever reason they're acquiring you. Um, you've got the people who own the business who want to have this exit, and then you've got everybody else who maybe don't have equity, and
Yeah.
it gets awkward and cagey. That happens all the time. So
And most of the time they like where they were before it gets the switch, like they're like,
Yeah.
oh, I remember this is how it used to be, and it's not that way anymore. And that's a whole adjustment that sometimes without the right structure and process and pillars, it really can go the wrong direction.
Yeah. That's an interesting piece because I like to use that as a, I mean, it's hard, but a coaching opportunity because I think that's a professional maturity thing. I mean, if there's one thing that I've learned in my career is you have to be adaptable to the change. And the more you can adapt to it and be unfazed by it, at least for me, the more success I've seen and being able to work within it. And that takes, it's not something you can just say to somebody. It takes a lot of work to get them to understand how they can leverage that to their benefit. But then there's also the possibility where they may be riffed and they don't get the opportunity to exercise that new skill.
well, oh yeah, go ahead, Allison.
Well, they get the chance to exercise the new skill, but perhaps not with you.
Yes.
And that's what-
Take everything
I like
with it
it.
and go to the next. 100%.
And I think that's where the storytelling and packaging it up
Yeah.
works, right? So when you talk about what you gain from, think about there's a lot to gain from change. You
Yeah.
learn a lot about yourself. You learn about your capacity. You learn about things that you never thought that you could get a chance to do. And that's the selling point. That's the beauty of if you can package it right and you can share and put them in that place of where the future could be, you help them see something different that they never imagined. Because everybody, when we talk about change, they go to the negative. But if you can flip
Yeah.
that to the positive side of it, you've just gave them skill sets and initiatives and drives that they never touched if
Yeah.
you package it in the right way. Yeah.
I like that a lot. That's I'm at my current organization. We're about to undergo change, and I mean everybody knows about it. And before there's been a little bit of chaos as they define it. And I remember saying, like my leaders have come to me. It's like, hey, it's a pretty chaotic time, and I was like, where I come from, this is nothing. This is easy. Like, let me tell you how like this actually feels very easy, and I've been able to build that story of I actually feel very comfortable in this. Let me know how I can help others who don't feel as comfortable in it because I've seen the end and I see how you can become better at it both as an organization, as an individual. And that's a really fun story for me to tell. And that's something that coming back to that skill, and maybe I'm not coaching them for the team now, maybe for someone else. That's what I like to come back to. It's like, hey, if you can navigate this, there's so much opportunity and being able to, maybe not here, but certainly somewhere else.
Yeah, Garrett, I remember, I think it was like a little over a year, maybe a year and a half ago, I was in those executive leadership meetings with you, and you might remember me talking about this, but I was talking about the fact that I felt like the duck, like we were going through all these changes, and I'm sitting there as a leader of a team of 30 and all these people that have report to me. And my feeling was, to your point, Tom, if I can be the duck and just be on the surface and that calm, it keeps everybody doing everything, share what I can share, but at least, underneath my legs are spinning, trying to figure out how to do everything with everybody. But that calmness is something that I kind of take as like a badge of, kind of to your point, Allison, around your experience makes you stronger. You went through change and you can now say you have this adaptability, you've been through this, been through that. It just adds to whether you want to call it your legacy or just your ability and capabilities.
Yeah, I love that. I used to have this saying. I was a teacher for a while. I used to have this saying, or I stole this quote from somebody: "Calm is contagious."
I love it.
And people they pick up on that. Like they're reading you and reading your cues. And if you're like, hey, this is gonna be okay,
Mhm.
they start to internalize that. I love that, Dory.
Well, what we're talking about, what we're circling around, and the thing I wrote was secure versus insecure leadership styles. And I mean that's essentially it is when you treat your job like as if it's the biggest, most important thing in the world, and if you lose it, your life is over. Like if you're operating with that mentality, the stench of desperation reeks and
Yep.
everyone can smell it. And it's a bad look. It just doesn't look everybody can smell it. It makes you look bad and it makes you not trustworthy because you're like, this person will absolutely undercut me if it means they can get further or secure themselves further entrenched in the organization. And that's interesting. So I guess maybe the question I have is, if you're a leader and you're thinking to yourself, I don't know, do I have a secure and insecure leadership style? How can people practice it? Like, is there books you recommend people read or are there mantras? I mean, I'm a big fan of Stoicism. If anybody likes Stoicism, I think that can help. But like, are there any guides that you would suggest that leaders have to practice more secure leadership styles within the workplace?
I've got a book, but I'll let either Allison or Tom go first if you guys want to throw out a book and why.
I don't have a book. Honestly,
Okay.
that to me that comes to being it's just kind of insecurity in general. Right? Right. You kind you I actually I think there's a couple of different layers. The first layer is, you can't just say I don't have those insecurities. You may have those insecurities, but you have to be very cognizant of those insecurities being clear to your team. And then the other thing that I'll add to that is, I think the assumption is that, especially if you're a new leader, that they're assuming that you're going to be looking out for yourself. I think in your actions, and this takes months, if not longer, you have to show in your actions that you're acting in their best interest. And not just and obviously that there's some conflict in there because your ultimate there is a hierarchy of how you're operating. I have to operate in the business's best interest. I've then operated in the team's best interest and then my own best interest. And then you have to demonstrate that. And when there's times where you're operating in the best interest of the company and not of the individual or your team, being very clear, like, hey, this is why we're doing it this way. And it's because ultimately we have to operate in the best interest of the company. And then and they're going to, I mean, your actions speak a lot louder than your words, and you just have to demonstrate at every turn that that hierarchy is actually governing your actions.
I agree.
Let's talk about team capacity here for a little bit because, Tom, you bring up actions, show that you've got your team's best interest. We talk about secure and insecure leadership styles. I think those are all relevant here, but it all kind of, when we come back to the topic of change without burnout, balancing innovation, stability, and team capacity is one that's always a really fascinating balance to strike. Because on one hand, as their leader, your goal is to encourage and push them to achieve new heights that they've never been able to achieve before. In a perfectly transparent environment, um, your team will tell you like things like, hey, yeah, you know what? I think I can take on a big, new, hairy, audacious goals. But unfortunately, in a pretty traditional work environment, we oftentimes give out bonuses and compensation based on your ability to achieve goals. If that's the case, as an employee, I am directly incentivized to set the lowest possible goal that I feel very, very, very confident I'm going to hit because I want to get the most amount of compensation as I possibly can. Um, Not to say that, like, don't get me wrong, aspirationally, I would love to go for a higher goal. Don't get me wrong, but like, if my compensation is like, cool, if I hit this quota, if I hit this mark, or if I do this thing, I'm going to get the maximum bonus. I want to make sure that it's going to be within striking distance. At the same time, objectivity diminishes the higher anyone goes in any organizational hierarchy. So if I'm a direct report to a boss, I probably want to be a team player. I want to be a yes person. Even if I'm totally overloaded, I don't want to feel like I'm looking incompetent or that I can't hang. And so I'll say yes, even though I'm drowning. How do we as leaders find that capacity balance? Does that question make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
We as leaders have to create a safe space to have those conversations with our employees. I used to have kind of a saying, and other people have it, of course, as well. But like I would say, when everything's a fire, nothing's a fire. And so having your team kind of be at that level of urgency all the time, that's not culture, that's uncomfortability, right? And it's not sustainable and it doesn't allow for growth. And then from a leadership standpoint, I used to always tell people never limit yourself by what you think or by what you've done in the past, right? This idea that you can always be changing and you can always be kind of doing other things. And so my leadership style was trying to, and Garrett knows this, was to empower my team. Like I would get creative around ways that I would kind of talk to them about certain things that they might be seeing that I'm not seeing. And I would not be like, hey, do it the Torey way, do it your way. And I might give like the goal or what I'm looking for from like an outline standpoint, and then never feed in any of the details. And what you can do is you can help people kind of see themselves as more than just that job title in those ways. And so as a leader, that's always been like a big part of my approach has been to empower my team to grow. And then the last thing I'll say regarding the book thing, because I had mentioned that I was going to tell you guys about that. The book that I read really early on in life from a recommendation from somebody. And then I would like be at events and be at conferences and they'd be like, oh, has anyone ever read this book? And it'd be like me and one other person would raise their hand. It's gotten more popular now. I probably read it close to 20 sometimes. I used to read it every single time I got on the plane. It's Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. It is the greatest book around attitude. And Allison, to your point, we were talking about kind of like what you can control, and what you can't control. This book, it's about the Holocaust, but nothing about like the Holocaust negativity, other than just like the fact that it's horrible that it happened. What it focuses on is when your rights and the situations and everything around you is being taken from you, you still get to choose your attitude. And so I've taken that into everything I've ever done, which is that I get to choose my attitude given any situation, a scary situation, comfortable situation, going after a job, whatever the case be, giving. And so I try to empower every single person with that same mentality and methodology as well. So I'd recommend that book to literally every single person I work for, every person I work with, and even people I just randomly get in touch with at different times in my life.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. I think I wrote the book down, so I'm definitely going to look it up. But also when you're talking about capacity to change, and when the team feels that they're overwhelmed and just enough is enough, As leaders, all of us as leaders on the team, we can decide kind of how we incorporate change into the environment. So sometimes change is just stacked, right? Which is like change here, now we're changing, now we're pivoting, now we're doing all of these different things. But if we do it in a sequence, then you can plan around it. And some of the biggest change that I've helped and I've been part of is I understood the capacity that the team already had. The work continues. The work that they're having, it's going to continue. But then I'm like, if we schedule it during the time where we've got interns, sometimes those things that just kills your time can be passed off to someone else. So you're not adding on headcount in a way that impacts the business from that level, but bringing in just some help. So thinking about it creatively, and we've done some of our biggest change during the time when we're onboarding an internship group. And it really helps because they can pass off those things that just has to get done, and they can focus on the bigger things, and they just don't feel the burden of everything's just being dumped and we're just going and my workload, and I'm just still trying to look up, get above the water to see if I can see. So
Sure.
sometimes that's helpful, and sometimes that's what leaders forget. How can we do it, and how can we help them relieve some of the stress that they already have? Because sometimes employees just don't know what to tell you. They don't know the help they need. So we
Right.
have to help them in certain ways.
Yeah. I think there's actually a few things in there that in your question, Garrett, that I was thinking about. But there's something I want to jump off that you said, Allison, which is, you know, getting creative. The other thing that I like to show, and again, I think this tends to be more of the middle management layer, where if everybody is slammed, and I also like to demonstrate, hey, I'm going to get in there and I'm going to take on other work that I wouldn't typically take on. And leading by that example, it's like, hey, I wouldn't normally do this, but I'm going to do this to demonstrate, like, we're going to do everything we can, and part of that is me as an individual doing what I can. Or yeah, and obviously there are other ways to. That's just one thing, and that's starting to build that trust with the team. And there was something else that you said where the employees are incentivized just to do the bare
Bare
minimum.
minimum.
And I that I actually I you want a disagreement. I firmly disagree with that. And I think that you can it really comes and it comes to something that you said, Tori, which is that attitude and is hiring for that. And there's a lot of things where and also tying this back to like the broader title of what we're talking about, ambition. I love hiring ambitious people. I love hiring people who are going to tell me like, you need to give me more. And maybe I'm kind of the same way. Like, you need to give me more. I want opportunity. And and also the job that the area that I oversee, it's a that's a very, very successful personality type. And I tell people when I hire them, and I tell people every chance I get, I'm going to advocate for you. That's my job as your leader. Advocate for pay increases, for promotions, and obviously you have to do the work for me to do that. But you are going to be your best advocate. You are like, I want you to, and anytime it's like, hey, I think I should be promoted. I'm like, all right, build the case with me. And the better case you build, and I know it feels like delegating it off to them, but I want to hear why they think and I want them to convince me, because then if I'm convinced and they've put in that trouble and I'm like 100% bought in, I'm going to be a better advocate for them. And I think that comes down back to like attitude and how you're hiring, so that you're not hiring somebody who's going to do the bare minimum. I want them to go. And then this again comes back to something else and we mentioned before. I very well may be preparing you for a career somewhere else, but that's okay. I'm okay with that. Like, I could build up a career and help grow somebody into the best employee only for them to leave, and I'm 100% okay with that. And that also helps that you have leadership that recognizes that, oh, you're building people who are so good they're getting poached, and that's actually a good thing.
No, I like it. I would say like my own like Tom, I totally agree with you. Like I think hiring ambitious people is awesome. I just would my only point is that in a lot of work environments, not all, but in a lot of work environments, there is an incentive to hit certain marks
Yeah.
that once you hit said mark, you get compensated. If your mark is too grand, you not only not get the bonus, but sometimes put yourself at risk of potentially getting laid off because you're not hitting the goal. So, like,
Yeah.
what the point I'm making is that for better or for worse, in those work environments where those exist, there is an incentive to set a low, like, okay, I'll make an analogy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did any of y'all take like intramural classes in college, like bowling or billiards or,
I
swimming
wish I did
or any
not. I
fun
know
class?
about this.
So,
Yeah.
like, I took bowling while in college, and one of the things that you learn is that if you bowl like a 200 or a 250 on your very first day of classes, if you only get marginally better, you're not going to actually do that well in the class. But if you start with like a 30 and then you get to a 50 and then you get to 100 and then by the end of the class you get to 150, you're going to get an A plus because that's what they're
Yeah.
looking for is progress. And so
Yeah.
that's
I
my
think
analogy
So,
within that
the
is
argument though is I think you're going to get figured out pretty quickly that you're a 200 playing down at a 30 or a 50.
you
Like,
might be right, yes, but that's the point is that I think in those work environments, I'm saying I think the incentive is wrong. I don't like the incentive. I just know a lot of organizations have that incentive structure set in place.
so to me, and this is coming from like being in sales orgs for years,
Sure.
it's like, oh, that's a bad comp plan. Like,
Yeah.
like that's what comes to my head. It's like actually the best, I think about a sales comp plan. The best comp plans are kickers, right?
yes,
Where
kickers and accelerators. Yeah.
exactly, like
Yep.
exactly, kickers and
Yep.
accelerators. Yeah,
Yep.
actually, Tori, I'll let you go with that one. Yeah, like that's the key. That's the
Yep.
key.
Yep. So then you're because what happens and I've been in so many different sales orgs, outside sales, internal, all this stuff, and you get decentivized for closing large deals because you
Hmm.
might get a capped commission. So then you as a creative salesperson are thinking about, well, maybe I don't close this one right now, or I'm going to stop selling here. I've been in that situation before. I've also been in ones where
Sandbagging.
you end up sandbagging, you hit your quota too quickly, and you're like, well, now the new quota is going to be this going forward. So if I
Yep.
add more to it, it's going to jump even higher to Garrett's point. So now you're going to push back. That's honestly, and I think we're getting to this not on the college side. I hope you got an A in bowling. But the idea here is more around you as a leader, myself included, needs to be able to run that flexibility gamut of going, hey, wait a second. I thought this was this way because I didn't have sales performers at this level. Now I do. I'm going to get creative and focus on making sure I get the best out of them. It's the same way we do with all of our people. We want to make sure we get the best out of them by kind of being that leader that can recognize where the talent is, recognize what they need in order to perform. But you never want to decentivize somebody. You never want them to try to be below the bar. You never want them to just trickle in and do the bare minimum. You want to create a situation, an organization, a structure, whatever you want to call it, that incentivizes growth, that incentivizes every single person putting their best foot forward. And then if you end up getting rift or any of those kind of things, you get to keep your head high and go, well, this was not because of anything I did. And that's the biggest issue that runs into the stigma, not now because we are in a world of comfortability and acceptance of people that have been laid off. But prior to, you think of like the 90s and 2000s, that aspect of being laid off just was subliminal messages nonstop, like that you did something wrong, you weren't this, that. Now that people are getting laid off while they're working at Microsoft, people are like, yeah, that's not a thing anymore. That you were laid off because you're bad at your job. It's because the company went a different way and all these kind of things. Um,
Yeah,
so to that point, Garrett, there's aspects around a lot of pushback. You want disagreement. Disagreement is setting the bar low for yourself and then trying to trickle through and hope that you make it through every riff. No, no.
yeah. I mean, I've realized like it's a spreadsheet. Sometimes your name, your number is perfect for that
Yep.
equation at the end,
Yes, the equation, correct.
and that's it. And that's it. And it's nothing personal. It's nothing you did, and that's that.
Well, everybody, this was a good pre-symposium panel. I think we covered a lot of ground here. If you're watching this and you're thinking to yourself, I want to meet these three great leaders, come to the Executive Symposium on February 12th. We're hosting it at the Round Rock Express and at Dell Diamond in Round Rock. So it overlooks the baseball field. It'll be a lot of fun. 5 to 8 p.m. I'll post the link on how to RSVP in the comments on this video. Topic is change without burnout, balancing innovation, stability,